good morning everyone. So today I'm going to discuss to you about listening, its process, types, levels, and roadblocks. When we talk about listening, we're going to compare it with the word hearing. So when you say hearing, it refers to the ability of a person to catch sounds from the environment but doesn't involve comprehension. And on the other hand, when we talk about listening, it involves understanding. So for example, when you are in a classroom setting and you can hear the sound of an air conditioner, you don't mind it because you are listening to what your teacher has been talking. So that's now the difference between these two terms, hearing and listening. So when it comes to listening, we have its process, and of course this process involves four stages, where the first stage is all about the physical or attention stage. So for physical or attention stage, it refers to the ability of a person to catch or hear the sounds using the auditory system. So of course, if the person is physically deaf, so for sure this person could not hear any sound at all and could not complete this stage of the listening process. Well, there are some people who are not physically deaf, but they are psychologically deaf. Like, they just don't tend to listen at all. They just don't have any interest. So that's why they could not complete the attention stage. However, if you can complete the first stage, you will proceed to the second stage, which is called the logical or auditory discrimination stage. So it refers now to the ability of the person to recognize and classify sounds according to its voice quality, pitch, tempo, force, emphasis, and volume. So when you talk about discrimination, it's not about like a negative word when you discriminate someone, but when you talk about discrimination, you are classifying various sounds of the language. So for example, we have the words sack and sock. If you cannot discriminate the vowel sound of it, you might understand a different thing, because when you say sack, it's a container, but when you say sock, it's something that you wear on your feet. And of course, it will affect the third level of listening, which is actually the third stage of listening rather, which is semantic or comprehension stage, which in this stage, the person has the ability to understand and put meaning to what is being heard in denotative and connotative level. So of course, if you can discriminate sound, you can identify or you can determine or comprehend rather the meaning of those words. And if you can pass the stage, then you can proceed to the fourth stage or the last stage of the listening process, which is the retention stage. So from the word retention, the person here has the ability to remember the information being conveyed, which may be used in reacting. There are some people, or there are some instances that we have been listening to a certain concept, but right after a few days or a few weeks, we cannot remember at all. So not all the time that we can reach this retention stage. However, if we keep on applying the concepts or we keep on reviewing concepts, then definitely we can retain information in our long-term memory. Okay? So I have here some questions. True or false? In all listening situations, we can complete all the stages in the listening process. True or false? If you answer false, then you are right. As what I've said, not all instances that we could retain the information that we have listened. However, we can understand as long as we're going to listen attentively to the speaker. Another question, the stages in the listening process can be interchanged. Like, can you only follow one flow of the stages in a certain process? Is it true or false? If you answer true, then you are correct. Because not all the time that we could understand what we have listened, because maybe the pronunciation is different, the voice volume is not that audible. So you tend to go back to a certain stage for you to understand things better. Okay? And now let's proceed to the types of listening. So when we talk about types of listening, we'll start with active listening and passive listening. So in a classroom setting, there are students who are active listeners. They react on what they have been listening to. However, there are some learners who are passive listeners. And what's the difficult about them is that you could not, as a teacher, you could not identify whether they understand what you've been saying because they don't have any reaction at all. Good thing if they are passive listeners but they understand what you've been saying. How about those listeners or those students who don't have any reaction because they don't understand a thing? And they're not opening it up, that they don't understand a certain concept. So it's very hard to identify them. So again, when you say active listening, you react based on what you have been listening on. And next is serious listening. And serious listening is divided into two main categories. You have critical or discriminative listening, and you have social listening. So the first one, critical or discriminative listening, is divided into four subcategories. First, you have the attentive listening. So when you say attentive, you give concentration on thoughts. Like for example, when you're listening to your math teacher, you attentively follow the process of the computation for you to arrive to the right answer. Because sometimes if you don't like math, like with just few blinks of your eye, you could not follow the process of how to solve a certain problem. So you have to attentively listen to your teacher. Second is retentive listening. So from the word retentive, you retain information, you remember information. So for example, you don't bring your phone and you're asking for the Facebook account of a certain person. So you listen to its name and you try to remember things, and once you get your phone, you can type in the correct name. So that is one example of retentive listening. Third is reflective listening. So when you say reflective, you reflect on the information being conveyed, and this is very relevant when we are having a recollection where there's one speaker sharing his or her life story and you can relate into it. And once you can relate into it, you can reflect on what has been happening to your life. So that's reflective listening. Another subcategory is reactive listening, wherein you prepare for reactions. For example, you're doing a debate. Of course, you listen to the speaker so that you can get information when you're going to use it to react to the person. So that is reactive listening. So the second category is social listening. And again, it has subcategories. First is appreciative listening. So when you say appreciative listening, you listen for pleasure. You listen for entertainment. For example, you're listening to your favorite songs because you want to relax. You want to feel the moment, okay? So that is appreciative listening. Second is conversational listening. Of course, you listen because you want to maintain camaraderie. You want to maintain good relationship. And I think no one loves to have a friend who don't listen at all. Okay? And third is courteous listening. So it is more than being silent. When you say courteous listening, you are silent because you give respect to the one who's talking. You don't interrupt right away. Okay, and those are the different types of listening. So for you, what is the most difficult type of listening? Well, it's your reflection. And now let's proceed to the levels of listening. So there are 6 levels of listening which a person does. And the first level is ignoring. So when you say ignoring, you completely deny the existence of the person. The person completely denies your existence too. Like if you don't like the person, you're not even looking at the person and just completely ignore his presence. Have you tried that one, ignoring someone? Or have you tried being ignored by someone? Okay, anyways. Level 2 is pretending. The listener here looks at the person blankly. Yes, I look at you on the eye level, but I just don't understand everything you said because I just don't like listening to you. I just look at you for the sake of looking at you, but I just don't care what you're saying. So that is pretending. I hope you haven't tried pretending inside the classroom. Okay, third level, selective listening. You only choose a certain part to listen, something that interests you. But the rest of the discussion, you don't like to listen because you just don't like the topic. And in that case, you might miss a very important information. Fourth is attentive listening. So attentive listening now involves the eyes, the ears, and the mind. Whereas when pretending, you only involve your eyes. Selective listening, eyes and ears. But for attentive, you include your mind because you follow the thoughts that the speaker is trying to share. And when we talk about sympathetic listening, it involves now the eyes, the ears, the mind, and the heart, because you involve emotion or affection while listening. So for example, someone shares his or her problem and you feel the sadness, the agony, the misery that the person is experiencing, then you are doing sympathetic listening. And of course, the last level, the highest level, is the empathic listening. So it includes active response. So now you give your reaction to the person, okay, who's talking to you. Especially if you can relate, you give advice, so you do empathic listening. You put yourself into the person's shoes. And this is what it means to the 6th level of listening. So for you, what level of listening do you do most often? Now let's proceed to the last topic, the roadblocks to listening. These are the barriers why a person could not listen well. First is hostility to the speaker. You don't like to listen because you just don't like the speaker at all. You become too unfriendly, okay? Like, I don't like his face, I don't like her face, I don't like what he or she is wearing, I don't like to listen to him or her. That's being unfriendly. So that's hostility to the speaker. Second is daydreaming. It usually happens when the listener gets bored and you tend to wander anywhere. Let's say you are inside a classroom, you daydream of your ultimate crush, that you are walking the beach, you're running, you are actually talking to each other, anywhere, okay? You actually go anywhere you like. And I guess you have experienced that one too. Third is prejudging. You don't listen because you have the prejudices in your mind. You have the biases in your mind even before listening. So for example, you are listening to a history class and you don't like history. Let's say you talk about our national hero, Jose Rizal. And you keep on hearing these names since elementary, and that's why you have these prejudices already. But you actually might miss very important information because there are still more in the history that you need to know. But you already give your prejudices, your biases, right, your judgment to this certain lesson. Fourth is selective listening. I guess I've mentioned this one to the levels. You only choose what to listen. And again, you might miss a very important information because you don't listen to all the concepts being discussed. Fifth is closed-mindedness. It occurs when one is overconfident, which he or she feels that his or her ideas are better than others. Like, why should I listen to you? I am way better than you. Or let's say their minds are closed already and they just don't want to listen to you. And they just don't care. They don't put any space in their mind to try to accommodate what you're saying. And sixth is listener's background. Of course, the person doesn't want to listen because the speaker has a different culture, different mores, different beliefs, which definitely affect listening. So we should not judge the person because the person has a different tradition from us. Listening to them will make us understand why the person doesn't believe in this or doesn't agree on this. And it doesn't mean that you will also agree. It's just that you give them the opportunity to explain themselves. And lastly, distractions. It includes various forms like personal, physical, environmental distraction. Like you cannot listen because it's just too noisy outside. You cannot listen because it's too hot inside the classroom. Or you're hungry, or you're sleepy. So there are many distractions around. So I hope you understand everything about listening and enjoy the rest of the day. See you next time.